Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Robert Allen, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Corporal Anne Collishaw. This evening, we warmly welcome Wing Commander Bob Howe, retired, representing the Air Force Association. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Those requiring a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Flight Sergeant Leonard Robert Carius, who was killed during the Second World War. Leonard Carius was born on the 12th of July 1920 in Brisbane to Robert and Eva Carius. Growing up, he had two sisters, Myrtle and Ivy, and a brother, Reginald. Their father, Robert, was a fuel merchant and taxi driver who had served with the 52nd Battalion in the First World War and had been wounded. Leonard attended Junction Park State School and enjoyed tennis and swimming. After leaving school, he found office work before becoming a carpenter, completing an apprenticeship in 1939. On the 13th of October 1941, Carius enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force, aged 21. He was trained as a navigator, and having received his Air Observer's badge, he was made a sergeant in August 1942. Carius embarked for overseas service from Sydney on the 18th of September 1942, arriving in the UK in January 1943. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 27,000 RAF pilots, navigators, wireless operators, air gunners and flight engineers who joined Australia and British squadrons in Britain throughout the course of the war. Further specialist training followed in England, and in February 1943, Carius was promoted to Flight Sergeant. On the last day of 1943, he was posted to No. 463 Squadron, RAAF. As part of Bomber Command, the squadron flew the 4-engine Arvo Lancaster heavy bomber. On the evening of the 30th of January in 1944, Bomber Command launched a major bombing raid on Berlin. Flight Sergeant Carius was the navigator on board Lancaster Joe J, which took off from the Royal Air Force Base at Waddington shortly after 5 p.m. The raid met with heavy enemy resistance over the target. Carius Lancaster was attacked by a night fighter that put the intercom out of action and set fire to 3 of the engines. The plane exploded and crashed near Lutendorf, about 120 kilometres northwest of Berlin. Bomb aimer Flight Sergeant Peter Giles was knocked unconscious by the explosion and thrown clear of the aircraft. He regained consciousness mid-air and managed to land safely, but was captured a week later. He was the only survivor. Those killed in the crash with Flight Sergeant Leonard Carius were fellow Australians Pilot Officer Lindsay Fairclough and Flight Sergeants Alan White and John McLean, along with British Sergeants Norman Verner and Dennis Robinson. After the war, the remains of Commonwealth servicemen buried in Europe were examined and identified where possible. The bodies of Carius and his crewmates were located, but only one could be identified. The unknown were reinterred into a communal grave at the Berlin Second World War Cemetery. Leonard Carius was 23 years old. He was dearly missed by his family, who placed in memoriam notices in the newspaper for years after his death. One read, "Loved, remembered, and longed for always." Leonard's brother, Reginald Carius, also enlisted in the Second World War, serving with the 64th Battalion in New Guinea and Morotai. He survived the war and returned home safely. In 1945, his wife gave birth to a son, whom they named Leonard. Flight Sergeant Leonard Carius's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, along with some 40,000 others from the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flight Sergeant Leonard Robert Carius, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.